just in that day. Finally grew some balls. Finally smart enough to grow some balls, and me told her to keep away from me and not put me in the middle of a rock and a hard place with those games that you get mad in the animal that you have beat to involve anybody that wouldn't be included as the Malcolm X who's involved in the evil, and not to see the love to call him a monkey in the middle that sees no hear, no see, no reason but to speak that's spoken. Like the spirit that has spoken into the food for thought and shit you talk will pass through you like the pessimist that meant to be pathological liars of pessimists to wrap you, extermination of a country that only will be segregated to only agree with the taking of the pledge with allegiance and face the flag that represents the representation or repression of current regrets and disregard to bombs and air and sovereign, being bombarded in vessels before vessels, and besides that embedded with the debt to coach to cast the spells that fund the cascades and homes best to provide the neglect while alive to be blessed with a funeral home to be compelled to see the compiling of composure or compose that can't be used for composing of the soul, the soil, the soak, the soul that was buried in the depths and doubts with the benefits of having no job and having benefits with others to celebrate the amnesty. Spirits and celebratory drinks to raise the minimum wage to tighten the wedge and the shoes that fit the purpose so to disconnect from the being down to earth and up making change and breaking the currency. Roots and problems and dollars you paid for that wisdom and that loan granted for the free education and willing to pay back before you're dead, and down payment on the forgiveness that you had for that premature releasing for the former bank account was depleted for 401ks worked harder that I can't afford to pay attention to tensions to hold grudge, jury to jerk. Judgment on how many numbers of times the words didn't work and add to the number of times that state of confusion, adding to the multiplication and multiples and times the mutants, homies, and hurdles. Stay introverts and look towards the horizontal for horizon, which shines always. It wasn't for the traveling light that years the sun. On the sun, the earth to deplete the life lived for the race not to deceive. The amazing energy but the distance of the disgrace. Placed upon the fortune and forgiveness for less. Debates and depths and mortgage to gauge the success and taken for the gratitude. The layman's faulted of understanding the latter is superstitious and tentative and repeatedly repentance. Repetitively, competitively, complicated and competitive with no compensation or anything to say for the commentary that really is too rare to be rearranged and weird to be groundwork like rebars, and you debate rebuttals, rebuilding of repercussions and deprivations of reparations, the repeal of repeating representatives and no tentative tenants, outside intentions and intentless gene rallies, and generally the hot Jimmy genes, the gene pool to justify genetic and general elections of electrifying energy to charge that monthly subscriber to the change of the Bill of Rights you left distracted. But couldn't stand the muddy waters for the complaints and dehydration, the conservation, the tolerance for the terrains when it rains, and paid the dues to live in the terrains. Or terrorists of terrible city of losing sight and getting citations for the strikes and fireworks not, or getting them worked up for the patriotic. When the protests by patriarchy, buying as patrons in bars to get shot by the police and patrol, and patron no limit to the limited lines and limitations and limit. Or well, the reunion, can't understand the rain, it's a comedy piece that's no joke. And when I tell you that you can't stand me, look at me as the enemy and not the enemy was no joke. And I'm doing stand up because I can't stand it, do. Stand up is standing up to a tall compromise, or probably never promised but kept quiet, completely lenient and developed and deviant, deplorable of circumstances that deployed and deprecated and deprived and detrimental to the definitely determined to terminate the execution that executes, and the executive that executed the expedition to be expedited, and expect the X to be as questions as Y and Z to cast the words and lines for the mouth to speak the spells that check themselves before you check them out, like silent letters are not to be heard but obsolete, live letters that you read to be history, or another fictional story that is the patriarchy and fans of the patriots, and patronizing the patterns that pat the backs of those who front on them with the uranium, the fake planets like assholes that plot out to be plain examples of the ignorance, artificial intelligence and the aliens who alienate from the plagiarism, and games and plagues they play with, down without the debt to be given the benefit of the doubt and taken back to the debt, and deprecating roads that paved the deprived with fuel to cold the streets with cancer to complain and pay for the copay, and complying and complicate the communication lines of age and the lineage. God is linear and really rare to raise assholes that have assumption to apparently appeal to the parents to pair the laughing stocks of the kids that kidding about the future as dark as the king named indigo but bright as the India in India, or India out of their minds, the bliss the media give medals to mediate. Maybe I'm just, or maybe that was just a justification. Developed in deviant, deplorable of circumstances, and deployed and deprecated and deprived it until detrimental indefinitely, determined to terminate the execution and execute the executive that executed the expedition to be expedited, and expect the X to be asked questions that Y about Z to cast words and lies out their mouth like spells that check themselves before you check them out. Silent letters that seem to be heard like the obsolete libraries you read to be history, or another fictional story that is patriarchy, and fans to be the patriots and patronizing the patterns and pat the backs of those in front of them. Uranium and fake planets like assholes that plot out to be plain examples of the ignorance of the artificial intelligence that aliens who alienate from plagiarism and games and plagues they play with the doubt, to be given with the benefit of doubt, to take it back by the debt, deprecating roads and pay for the deprived, and feel to cold the streets with cancer to complain and pay for the copay, and compliant for the complications of the communication lines of age and lineage, and God is linear and rarely rare to raise assholes and assumptions, and apparently appealing as parents to pair the laughing stocks, the kids that are kidding about a future that's dark as a king named Indigo, or bright as an Indian in India, or India out of their minds, and to be blessed the media to give medals to mediate the medicinal, the medieval, to reconciliation of the remnants of the reminiscent of Renaissance, the history to revolve around the revolution instead of institutions, that boundaries of constitutional contest, for contestants to contemplate compensation or be compelled and wise without a W-2 wage to fill out and pour out the blood from institutionalized constitutes the consistency, and contestants are tested as crimes and probably pronounced pro, bi, and gay, advocate being straight and being happy, contradictories and contracts on the contrary, and contrast to compare companies, to compare competitors, and compensation for those who pay them to complain. The corporations when born into the business and tax your breath to treason, and you won't care for the reasons that you won't even know about. Spend too much time that you work to buy into the seasons and shop about the patterns and partnerships that part us out. The compensation is completely comparable to parables. Taunting, taught, and read about the newspapers that old news traveling at speed of ignorance and hate. To wait to be distributed to destructive and constructs the structures and statutes and liberty and liberals that left the rights and rights the left to decide the deceit and deficit and defeated the groundwork that grounded that disconnect the souls that they walk, and the shit left from the dyslexic that walk God when the sun sets, the race to hate, the finishing line that finished the line of sight, from seafood to food that we don't want to see ourselves eat, the food chain, the totem pole, the upper polar opposites, the polar bear that barely make it to extinction, or exempt the experience to taste the example of every X, the axis, the pits, and the arms of the army, and the articles and gun magazines to articulate the art and attributes, and the tribute to the act to a domino, snowmen that snowmen melt to see the effects of change in climates, the orgasms, and organic sex parties to vote at the polls, and pews to find portals in the pews to publish the souls to naked truth in beds that they lie and embedded. Whether or not you can change the Bill of Rights, you left distracted. You couldn't stand the muddy waters and the complaints of dehydration, conservation to the tolerate to the terrains when it rains, and it's paid the dues to live in the terrace of terrible cities that losing sight, getting citations. Finally smart enough to grow that balls, you said. Spoken like the spirit that has spoken into the food for thought, the shit you talked of a past truth, the pessimists that meant to be pathological liars, or pessimists who rat the extermination of a country that will only be segregated to only agreed upon taking of the Pledge of Allegiance. You have to face that flag that represents the representations, or repression, or common regrets of disregard, and bombs in the air, and sovereigns, and being bombarded with pesos, and better the dead to cast the spells to fund the cascades, and homeless vets to provide the neglect, while the live to be blessed with the funeral home, to be compelled to see the compiling of compost that can't be used or composed for the soul, for the soil to soak the soul.